This presentation looks at the substitution stage of the SAMR model, SAMR model, providing some examples to explain this stage of the model. This presentation is the second in a series of presentations on the SAMR model, and the series is made up of 5 presentations. The first being an introduction to the model, followed by 4 separate presentations, each one concentrating on a different stage of the model. Substitution. In this circumstance, the substitution refers where a technology acts as a direct tool substitute with no functional change. There are so many instances where technology is just used on a substitution basis, but it is important to note at this early stage of the presentation that the same technology may be used by a different teacher, slightly differently, that will move it up to a different level on the model. That's to say, a technology is not limited to one particular level. It all depends on how it's used. To illustrate the model, I want to use a comparison to a taxonomy that the majority of educators are familiar with. It's Bloom's taxonomy. This particular version of a taxonomy is referred to as a digital Bloom's taxonomy. And I've came across several versions of the digital Bloom's taxonomy, but I've decided to create this version myself just to highlight free technologies that can be used in teaching. I've inserted logos for each one of the various technologies that can be used with your students. Similar to the SAMR model, it should be noted that technologies are not limited to one level. For example, Facebook in this diagram is on level 2, the level for understanding, but could easily fit into other levels. Starting at the lowest level, and in essence this is where the SAMR comes in, it is a model that is used on how technology, any one of these technologies listed above in the Bloom's taxonomy, how technology is being used in teaching. The SAMR model puts a framework or a scaffold on the adoption of technology into the classroom. So what is the SAMR module? The SAMR module really reflects what we refer to as the technology adoption life cycle. This was a phrase coined by Ruben Presentura, and he divided it up into 4 distinct stages: substitution, augmentation, modification, and redefinition. Hence the name, the SAMR model. The life cycle starts at substitution, where it acts as a direct replacement for a prior activity with no functional improvement. This then progresses to augmentation, where there's a bit of functional improvement, and then jumps to modification, and then finally finishes off at redefinition. The SAMR model is further divided into 2 distinct sections: enhancing and transforming. So you may see the SAMR model broken down and displayed like this. Personally speaking, I keep wanting to dress up my substitution and augmentation activities, but I had to remind myself this caveat: there's nothing wrong with the S, the substitution, and the A, the augmentation levels, if it's appropriate for the task. And furthermore, it's worth reminding yourself that everybody has to start somewhere. Yes, ideally we'll all be at the redefinition stage, but we have to start somewhere. Okay, so what's meant by this substitution stage? I said earlier, it's where technology acts as a direct substitute, but with no functional change. So I want to give you some examples. Earlier I mentioned Ruben Presentura, the brains behind this model. He uses a typewriter as a potential example for this level. He states that at substitution level you would literally replace the typewriter with the word processor and use no other features such as spell check or cut and paste or anything along those lines. In a podcast, he uses the example of spotting a mistake in your word processing. Do you hit the backspace key over and over and over again until you back up to the mistake? Or do you use the mouse and go directly to mistake? Or better yet, do you use spell checker and have it do the work for you? His research has found that if you stay at this substitution level, your productivity will actually drop. A second example from my experience would be the way some people use the smartboard, a piece of technology with huge potential, and people just use it the way they use a normal whiteboard. To me, this is incredibly frustrating and unfortunately an all too common experience. But again, I must stress a point I brought up earlier on, that this is gladly not the case with every teacher, and the opportunity available through the use of the smartboard, the opportunity for increased and enhanced learning is tremendous if the technology is used correctly. The third and final case study I will use again is a very, very common example. It's for when teachers no longer provide copies of their presentation in handout forms to their students. Instead, they just post them in PDF format on their VLE, on their virtual learning environment, for example Moodle. While this is a significant cost saver for the college, this cost is just simply pushed onto the students, and there is no improvement in the learning experience for the student. So that is another example of a substitution. Okay, so in conclusion, the aim of this presentation was to highlight the substitution stage of the SAMR model, and hopefully this video has encouraged you to look at your teaching activities and see where they fit on the SAMR model. But just remember that everybody needs a starting point. Substitution should only be a transitional stage. You should aim higher up on the level. And a lot of technologies can be used as examples of each stage of the model. It all really depends on how they're implemented. This video will be supported by additional videos illustrating each one of the elements, examples of each one of the elements. The videos are available on my blog, enhancingteaching.com. The model is very practical in my opinion and could be used as a CPD tool to encourage educators to self-assess their teaching activities and set personal goals to progress along this model. I'd like to acknowledge the sources that I've used for this presentation. I've purposely used my Diigo bookmark to share these references with you to ensure that you will always receive the most up-to-date set of references that I have on the SAMR model. I mentioned my blog on the last slide, so I won't flaunt it too much, but there are a significant amount of resources for teachers available through this site, all of which are free.